Niger Hunter are further emboldened by the support they have received from Burkina Faso and Mali. It is an indication that these Francophone countries are indeed ready to break free from France, their original colonial powers. The ECOWAS authorities' stand remains that power must transcend in a democratic manner according to the protocol of the regional body. The ECOWAS Protocol on Peace, Security, Stability and Good Governance was recognized in the 1993 treaty. The 2001 Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance in its Article 1C has zero tolerance for power obtained or maintained by unconstitutional means. It insists on strict adherence to democratic principles. This is the basis that ECOWAS is insisting that President Mohamed Bazoum, who was democratically elected, must be reinstated by the military leaders. The world now looks to ECOWAS to champion the mission of returning democracy to at least Niger as the body meets on Thursday. Moyo Thomas, TVC News, Abuja.
Let's take a short break, and when we return, it will be time to speak with our guest of the day, who is the Special Advisor to President on Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngelale, for discussion on focus on Pres.Tinubu's interventionist measures amid petrol subsidy removal pains. Please stay with us. Thanks a lot for staying with us, and welcome back to Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. And now to our interview with the guest of the day. I am joined by the Special Advisor to President on Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngelale, for discussion on Pres.Tinubu's interventionist measures amid petrol subsidy removal pains. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good evening to you, my dear sister, and good evening to all of our esteemed viewers nationwide and abroad.
All right, so let's begin with the situation in Niger Republic. The ECOWAS summit is Thursday. What is the current state of affairs?
The current state of affairs simply would be at this point that His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, yes, but also the chairman of ECOWAS, has been really at the forefront of what has been a consensus position of the ECOWAS member heads of state that the crisis in Niger Republic does require an immediate resolution. And of course, as you alluded to correctly, tomorrow there is an ECOWAS Extraordinary Summit. And it's worth noting that the response, I believe, in recent days from some public analysts and some segments of the media alluding to various innuendos concerning the actions of ECOWAS within Niger Republic, they certainly do need to be addressed. First and foremost, let's appreciate the fact that every move made by His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been based on the authority of the consensus resolution of the ECOWAS member heads of state concerning all actions, all responsive actions toward resolving the crisis in Niger Republic. We have, fortunately, in recent days, drawn the attention of the domestic and international media to the reality that not only has this been a consensus position, but that every action that has been taken up until this point has been based on facts on the ground, realities on the ground, and not based on any ethnic or religious considerations. And we have certainly asked our media partners and friends to ensure that the scenario is reported responsibly to reflect not the sensational stuff, but the factual substance of what is going on in the Niger Republic and what the response of ECOWAS has been. Further to that point, it's worth mentioning that His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been at the forefront, of course, of the engagements between ECOWAS and the international community. But even as His Excellency Mr. President has shown an unprecedented scale and style of leadership in response to the Niger crisis, he has made it clear that our position as a nation and as a regional body of ECOWAS is the position of the region and not the position of any international group of countries or foreign country or foreign power that is working, that we would be working on behalf of. We do not hold anybody's brief in this situation. We are holding and developing an African position that is based on what African nations, particularly the nations of ECOWAS, believe is best for the peace, development, and prosperity of the region, and not what is in the interest of any international power. So this is what we want to make clear, and certainly we are very certain that tomorrow the outcomes of the ECOWAS Extraordinary Summit will reflect the position of ECOWAS and not the position of anybody else.
All right, so for further clarity, it seems that global geopolitics runs deeply into all of this. Is Nigeria aligning with a particular side geopolitically between East and West?
You see, the Nigerian presidency is, to say it's powerful, to say that it is important, to say that it is prestigious, is a gross understatement. I have always been of the conviction that those who do not understand the primacy and the power of the Nigerian presidency and the importance that seat carries in international affairs simply don't appreciate the value of what that seat represents. When you join that with the personal gravitas and networking capacity of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, you know that it would be ridiculous and preposterous to suggest that the Nigerian president, especially this Nigerian president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, would be taking any position on behalf of any other nation. There is no nation on earth powerful enough to command the posture or the position or the statement of the Nigerian president. We would never agree to a scenario in which we would be second or third class citizens of somebody else's political grouping or political clique. His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is not just the president of Nigeria, not just the chairman of ECOWAS. He is symbolically, certainly, as the leader of Africa's most populous nation, as the leader of Africa's largest economy, he is in pole position as the foremost leader on the African continent. And his focus is going to continue to be on being the effective leader he is in galvanizing consensus opinion on views across multiple sectors, including defense issues, economic issues, geopolitical issues, and other spheres where we can come to a common position within the African Union to form our own independent views and perspectives on global affairs. It is the president's well-reasoned position that once we effectively come together, whether it's in terms of trade, whether it's in terms of politics, whether it's in terms of our security agreements with each other, we will then be best placed to conduct the effective negotiations required with the international community to truly fulfill the promise of this continent and, of course, this country. So I would say, with all of that said, that any suggestion that any international power or any European or American power or Eastern power, the notion that they are somehow controlling what we are doing, what we are saying, where we stand on these issues is not only fictitious, false, and preposterous, but frankly, it's insulting to the dignity of over 200 million Nigerians who are indeed citizens of Africa's greatest nation. So that is the position. We will continue to be at the forefront of shaping opinion in the region and on the continent, and that involves us being ahead of a political grouping rather than running to join somebody else's political grouping, particularly on issues as sensitive as the peace and prosperity of the African continent. And I can assure you that even our position on the Niger crisis, not just nationally but regionally, is in large part informed by the wisdom and by the talent and by the networking capability and leadership capacity of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And I believe we've heard other African leaders attest to his effective leadership in this regard.
All right. Thanks for that clarity. Now, let's get to the crux of our discussion for tonight. The negotiation with organized labor is still ongoing. What do you think is causing the delay in striking a deal with the workers' union?
Well, I don't know that it's fair to characterize it as a delay. When you have an agreement between two parties, that there are certain modalities that need to be worked out, and you agree that on the basis of a certain window of time, that following that window, you would come together and work out the finer details. I wouldn't call that a delay. I would rather call that the implementation of a process. So we are in process, and we are quite pleased that the negotiations with organized labor has led to a situation in which we do not have the kinds of street protests that Nigerians for decades now have become accustomed to. We have relative calm. Nigerians are able to go about their business. They're able to access, a free supply of things like fuel and other necessities in a time when, in previous years past, such things would have been difficult to get at a time when the government had been negotiating with labor. So we're not yet at the finish line, but we're certainly not at the starting line. We are in progress, and I believe that very soon there will be a conclusion that Nigerians will be happy with.
So the nationwide clamor for subsidy politics is still on. How is the government working on implementation of its planned policies for this?
There is likely nothing more at the forefront. I know the Niger crisis has, of course, been a major distraction and a headache for leaders in the region. But domestically, there has been nothing more at the forefront of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's thinking than the welfare of Nigerians and of the challenges that he is so acutely aware that they are facing. He fully understands and appreciates when he wakes up in the morning that Nigerians are battling with increasing food prices, that Nigerians are facing increased energy and fuel prices, that Nigerians are facing stagnating wages and a devaluing currency as a result of the very important economic reforms we're putting in place around the unification of the foreign exchange rates. There has been a consensus really amongst all sides of the political divide and even amongst most elements of the organized labor in the country, that the withdrawal of subsidy was no doubt the right thing to do. And doing it when we did it was the right timing, given the fact of how we were financing it before then and the fact that the previously gross mismanagement of the Central Bank of Nigeria in recent years had led to a situation in which that struggle to maintain the subsidy was made even more precarious and burdensome. But in view of all of that, in view of that consensus, it does not change the fact that these reforms have brought about short-term economic pain, which is why the president has moved very swiftly, not just engaging with all stakeholders in the country, political, business, in the organized labor movement and other stakeholders, but also ensuring that we deal with this issue of the distribution of the palliatives in a tiered, structured, and meticulous way. What do I mean by that? In previous years, over the course of the last few decades, when federal administrations seek to implement palliative distribution programs or some form of economic relief programs, there's this tendency to come up with a brilliant idea at the center in Abuja, and then because it is not effectively structured to align in a handshake with the subnational governments, the states and the local governments, you find that in implementation, that good idea essentially goes to die. And so what Mr. President understands, as a long-time subnational leader, as an 8-year governor of Lagos State, he understands where the shoe pinches the foot of Nigerians. He understands where implementation can go awry. And so as a result of that, what he has done is he said, look, from the very beginning of this program, we are going to ensure that we take it from the bottom up rather than top to bottom. So he has actively courted all state governors, irrespective of political affiliation or any other difference, and said, look, the time for politics is over. The time for governance is now. All of us must now unite to confront the challenges facing our people. In practical terms, what this will mean is that if you look at the issue of energy, let's start with the palliative around the reduction in fuel prices over time, is the CNG push that is being accelerated by His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. What he has done is he has arranged for a working group between the state governments and the federal administration to ensure that we step in with certain reliefs that would bring down the costs of accessing CNG fuel as an alternative to PMS. In specific terms, CNG on average, depending on market conditions, can range anywhere from 175 naira per litre to about 250 naira per litre at any given point in time. This is running against PMS, which is running at an average between 617 naira per litre to up to 700 naira per litre in some parts of the country. Now, you know that with that savings, Nigerians would naturally want to key into the CNG revolution. But the president wants to ensure that we deal with both sides of the coin. That's the supply side issue and the demand side issue. On the one hand, we have this great supply of natural gas, where we have massive domestic gas that we are not effectively utilizing, hence flaring that's destroying the environment and also wasting money. The president is saying we must monetize every bit of our gas resource that's in the ground when we pull it out. And so he's identified CNG as a major means of doing so. So how this is going to work, in effect, is that the CNG is going to be distributed to filling stations. The president has been able to, through the NNPCL, strike a deal with an indigenous company known as NIPCO. Effectively, we are going to be rolling out 56 new CNG filling stations across all states of the Federation over the course of the next 18 months. In phase 1, which runs over the course of the next 6 to 7 months, we'll be rolling out the first 21 stations that is going to be backed by a federal government-backed financing guarantee for NIPCO to be able to access the funding they need to make this happen. And then in phase 2, running from approximately May 2024 to May 2025, essentially the midterm of Mr. President, we're going to be rolling out an additional 35 CNG filling stations. The reason why this is important, and that's just one company, NIPCO. We have pending agreements with several other stakeholders in the sector who are interested now in establishing CNG retail filling stations, in addition to co-locating new CNG fill-up points at existing NNPCL retail filling stations, which obviously boasts of the largest network of retail filling stations across all states of the Federation across the country. So you first establish the supply, right, ensuring that Nigerians can be able to access the CNG anywhere they live in the country. The next element of this is making sure that you deal with demand. Once you have all these filling stations and Nigerians want to get the cheaper CNG as against the more expensive PMS, the issue now is about how do you make available the CNG compliant vehicles, which is why Mr. President, in his wisdom, has been able to lay out a very clear plan of financing between the NNPCL and other partners to ensure that we accelerate not just the import, but also the local manufacturing of CNG conversion kits with a financing package that will allow Nigerians of all income levels. We're talking civil servants, we're talking the woman who works in a market selling textiles and all of that in the informal, rural, and urban economies, that they will now be able to say, look, I make 100,000 naira a month, I make 50,000 naira a month. Based on your income, we will now be able to deduce from that income that you've proven that you earn a monthly increment that you will now be able to pay over a very long period of time for a CNG conversion kit, so that your PMS-dependent vehicle today, whether it's keke napep, whether it's motorcycle, whether it's saloon car, truck, van, or commercial vehicle, that we can convert that for you to CNG so that you can benefit from the massive cost savings of the CNG conversion. So we provide those kits on a financing arrangement that all Nigerians will be able to afford, so that they can now, so that we can deal with the demand side by making sure that we have the market for that CNG supply to be off-taken by Nigerians who now have CNG-compliant keke napeps, motorcycles, vehicles of all different types. This is no strange movement, by the way. In India right now, you have a law on ground today in India that renders mandatory the use of CNG on all commercial vehicles. By commercial vehicles, I mean vehicles that are used to either transport economic goods or transport human beings who are paying to be transported. So if you have all commercial vehicles mandated to use CNG, which is better for the environment and it's cheaper for the consumer, it really becomes a no-brainer. So there are many models that we can follow as we quickly accelerate the implementation under the leadership of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. There are more details, but I'm sure at some point you will need to take a commercial break.
All right. Before we take that commercial break, let's quickly talk about some of the issues organized labor has with government. And one of the issues is a new minimum wage, but we hear the committee set up for the purpose is yet to sit. What's happening?
Yes, so this is another leg of the multifarious and robust response of the federal government to the economic challenges confronting Nigerians, is a new minimum wage. Okay, so first of all, let me detail to Nigerians tonight how this is going to be sponsored, how this is going to be funded. When we talk about a new minimum wage, there's a history to this. You would recall under the previous administration, under the immediate past President Muhammadu Buhari, the former president was very empathetic toward the plight of Nigerians. He understood that Nigerians were dealing with harsh economic conditions through the recessions, through the COVID-19 pandemic and the like. And he was very adamant about how we were going to ensure as a government that people would have access to a higher minimum wage to deal with the economic challenges they were confronting. But at that time, and there's a reason why I'm raising the history, at that time, you would recall that the state governors and the state governments were essentially rebelling. They were saying, Mr. President, you want to stuff a new minimum wage of 30,000 naira a month down our throats when already we're battling to pay existing wages and existing pensions and other entitlements. So there was problem, which is why you had the selective, this kind of selective approach where some states were paying it, some states were not paying it. Now, what His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been able to do just a little bit differently is that he, from the very outset, he brought the state governors together, particularly, not just directly, but also through the aegis of the National Economic Council, ably chaired by His Excellency the Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, where an agreement was struck that indeed the time is more than ripe for Nigerians to have a competitive, livable new minimum wage. It was on the basis of that general basic understanding that now the conversations with the organized labor movement in the country and the state governments began to intensify. Now, what's important is that it's one thing to say you're going to bring a new minimum wage, but if you cannot, if the economic fundamentals of the country do not support it, then it becomes propaganda, it becomes a joke, it becomes something on paper that's not going to be implemented. which is why I want to take time to explain how we're going to fund it. Because His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had the foresight and the boldness and the political will to be able to remove the fuel subsidy, what we saw, and I challenge any of our viewers who may be skeptical of what I'm about to say to search, fact check what I'm saying on Google or anywhere else. In the month of April 2023, we had FARC essentially sharing a little bit over 600 billion to the states, which you know is not so much. And that had been the basic average. If you average most of the FARC allocations to the states over the course of the last 3 years, it will be dancing somewhere between 600 and 800 billion per month. Now, but mostly on the underside, mostly closer to 500 to 600 billion. Now, what now happened was once the April was 600. In May 2023, that was the month Mr. President was sworn in. The FARC allocation was somewhere in the realm of 700 billion or so. Now, Mr. President, as of June 1, removes the subsidy. So all through the month of June, you now have the savings that is being tapped from the removal of the subsidy. By the end of June into early July, FARC now announces a new allocation of what is essentially a record of 1.959 trillion naira, as against 700 billion the previous month. So you're looking at a month-on-month surplus of 1.2 trillion naira as a result of Mr. President's very courageous move and his effective management of the response of the labor unions, which in the past would have led to a nationwide shutdown. Because of his leadership, because of his diplomacy, he was able to forestall that from happening, even while reaping for the country the benefits of the removal of the subsidy. I think that ability to manage that situation is something I don't think the president gets enough credit for. But as I was saying, with this 1.9 trillion, what Mr. President has done very wisely was saying, look, if we inject that entire 1.9 trillion, which had always been the trend in the past, whatever revenue we get, previous presidents down the line, from even down to 1999, they will just throw it into the economy direct, just direct, irrespective of the impact it will have. Mr. President, as an accountant, says, look, no, this is not going to work. If we throw 1.959 trillion naira into the economy now, we can overheat it and worsen our inflation concerns. As a result of that, what we're going to do is we're going to set aside 790 billion every month. It will even scale up as the accruals rise in quantity. But as of June, we'll put aside 790 billion. We'll take 900 billion, which is almost 300 billion more than what the states were getting before, and give them the 900 billion. So now states are happy because they now have more resources to now position themselves to pay a new livable and competitive national minimum wage. So not only are you having the savings, obviously, for our reserves, but also savings to invest in the new policy instrument that Mr. President put in place, which is the infrastructure fund for states to tap into, so that they can tap into this investment account essentially as a counterpart fund for infrastructure projects within their states that would lead to obviously more job creation, more tax payment, more revenue generation, but more importantly, a trickling down of those newly found resources from the subsidy removal into all aspects of the informal economy, where you're now going to have vendors. I want to make this practical for Nigerians so that they can understand the value of what Mr. President is doing. The people who are supplying sand on the construction sites, people who are supplying cement, the people who are supplying glass, the people who are supplying these very granular elements of these construction endeavors across the country. These are Nigerian citizens at the lowest income level in the country who are now seeing an inflow of business that they would not have otherwise seen if this fund had not been made available to the states directly for the purpose of infrastructure provision and creation. So these are the various interventions that are being put in place. So when we say a new minimum wage is coming through the National Minimum Wage Review Committee, we are telling you that the funds are on the ground. We're not scurrying around looking for the IMF or the World Bank or anybody else to bail us out. We are now in a position with an economic expert as president of the country, effectively stewarding and managing prudently the resources of the country to ensure that all the various priorities we have across economic sectors are being catered to in a responsible way, but also in a way that would ensure that we do not worsen our inflation concerns and our interest rate concerns. And this is something that I think when we eventually bounce through this difficult time, Nigerians will be able to look back on the steps Mr. President took and appreciate the wisdom with which he has been able to implement his economic reforms in the country.
All right. I've been speaking with the Special Advisor to President on Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngelale. We'll take a break now, and this conversation will continue when I come back. Stay with us.
It's always a great morning on the...
I've been speaking with the Special Advisor to President on Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngelale, for discussion on Pres.Tinubu's interventionist measures and implementation plans. All right, Mr. Ajuri, now another request by Labour is that it does not want the Chief of Staff, Abiamila, to lead negotiations on government side. What's going on in that regard?
My tendency is to avoid making very important and critical issues into the kind of trivialized and personalized statements that tend to be bandied around in the public domain by certain parties and actors. The issues confronting Nigerians are far too dire and serious to be talking about who should be sitting in a conference room and who should not be sitting in a conference room. We are all adults. I want to believe that we are all patriots and we are all Nigerians. And so the notion that any consideration would be higher than the consideration of what Nigerians are going through and the urgent and swift need for us to implement those measures that will bring succor to Nigerian families across this great nation. The notion that anything would be more important than that is ridiculous. And so I don't want to dedicate too much time to any of those kinds of trivial statements. I would just say that we are going to continue to effectively engage in the good faith negotiations we are engaging in. And I must say, despite the kinds of public posturing that we see from certain stakeholders, that the actual work of getting these policies moving from ideation stage into effective implementation stage, that process is going on well, and that's what matters.
All right. So let's take a look at another relief packages announced by President Tinubu, like acquisition of 3,000 buses for mass transit. What stage are we on this?
Great question. So this is a major part of what I was referring to earlier when we talk about the CNG revolution that Mr. President is very aggressively pushing forward. Yes, I did refer to, obviously, the supply side, dealing with the establishment of CNG filling stations where Nigerians can access the CNG with convenience. Then dealing with the demand side, I talked about the conversion kits so that you can convert the over 13 million vehicles plying Nigerian roads every day over a period of time with a very creative long-term financing arrangement that would cater to all levels of salaries of Nigerian workers across the formal and informal economic sectors. So that deals with that. But then you've touched on the next leg of the demand side of the CNG revolution, which is the provision of over 3,000 buses, CNG-fueled buses, approximately 20-seater buses in the country. Now, that is obviously a far cry, right, from, satiating aggregate national demand when you talk about commercial transportation, which is why it's only one. I want to emphasize this because I've been on television and radio across this great country over the course of the last several days, and one of the concerns Nigerians consistently raise with me is the idea that 3,000 buses is just insufficient. And we agree with them. But it's important for them to know that it's not in isolation. That's not the only thing that we're doing. Yes, Mr. President did announce the provision of over 100 billion naira for the manufacturing and provision of 3,000 CNG fuel buses to be sent to all of our major urban transportation centers across all states of the Federation. But in addition to that, what is being overlooked is that Mr. President also approved a very substantial financing package for transport companies in the country. This financing package is going to be running at a single-digit interest rate loan with a moratorium and a long repayment plan of, I believe, over 5 years. So when you have that in place, and you have also the incentive that this administration has on ground for automobile manufacturers, essentially a 10-year tax relief window has been provided for automobile manufacturers to enhance local production of automobiles, buses, and the like. You will now know that the 3,000 is just essentially, look at it as government's provision to kind of provide an initial boost to the manufacturing boom, automobile manufacturing boom in the country. But it is not the end game. The end game is essentially creating the incentive so that the private sector comes in very aggressively with the tax reliefs that they're going to get that are internationally competitive, and also the massive financing package that we're putting in place through our banks to further incentivize automobile manufacturers in the country to move into CNG, to move into EV production, that's electric vehicle production, and the like. These are the incentives that will ensure that we get production that far outpaces and outstrips the 3,000 CNG buses that we want to provide in the immediate term. So there's the difference between the immediate plan and then the medium to long-term plan, which involves putting in the incentives now for the private sector to come in. Now, what Mr. President is doing, which is characteristic of almost all of his other economic reform efforts across the other sectors, is that in manufacturing, he is saying that it is not enough for us to continue to simply just import whole buses or import whole vehicles anymore, that we move beyond that stage. We have tens of millions of able-bodied, very brilliant, very innovative young Nigerians across this country craving and thirsting for an opportunity to put their hands on the wheel of national development. And we're saying we're going to provide them that steering wheel. And the way we're going to do that is ensure that not only will they have access to training so that they can be part of the process of things like CNG conversion and the process of manufacturing CNG-fueled buses and vehicles across the length and breadth of our country, but also to ensure that we get maximum value out of this. If we are producing all of the inputs that go into the manufacturing of these buses, then you know that the wealth generation is staying within the country, the job creation is staying within the country, and the tax net will automatically increase with the increase in job creation. So the revenues in the country will only expand. That is the focus of Mr. President.
All right. But when it comes to the MSMEs, who are regarded as the major drivers of the economy, how is the government interfacing with them to bring its plans to fruition?
Very important. So it's one thing to deal with our individual citizens and what we can do for them and their families. It's another thing entirely to deal with businesses that are obviously impacting several families at a go. What His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has put on the table is a set of MSME capitalization initiatives, but not just for micro and small and medium scale enterprises, also for large industry. So let me start with the large industry. Mr. President has put in place what we call, this administration calls the 75 for 75. 75 billion naira worth of very low interest rate financing facilities for 75 selectively targeted large industries across all states of the Federation, across senatorial districts, where we're going to be able to intervene with 1 billion naira for each industry. over a 9-month period so that we do a few things. Number one, we ensure that we first stop job losses. We want to stop the loss of existing jobs. That's number one. The second one is this fund will go to ensure that those industries are able to expand their operations and add new jobs, create new jobs for unemployed Nigerians. And then, of course, on the third leg of that is ensuring that these industries are industries that would have full backward integration into other parts of the economy, where these are not import-based industries, for example. These are industries that are focused on starting their products with raw materials sourced from Nigeria and finishing the value addition within Nigeria as well, so that Nigeria gets full value. These are the companies that we're focused on in the 75 for 75. So that's our package for large industries, in addition to the traditional lending that will continue to run from the Central Bank of Nigeria for large industry, continue to run from the Development Bank of Nigeria for large industry, that will continue to run from the Bank of Industry for large industry, and the like. So large industry is definitely taken care of by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But because Mr. President is a progressive, because he has always been concerned with Nigerians who have been at the bottom rung of the economic ladder in this country, who he's desperate to assist them to climb up that ladder, he's now focused also on MSMEs, which is why he's put in place a measure, a facility of 175 billion naira in the first instance, 50 billion of which will be given in the form of grant, meaning that our people, our small business owners across this country, in all states of the Federation, those who access this grant, which will be digitally transferred, so it's not going to be a situation where some bureaucrat or some corrupt politician will come and divert it. It will be impossible based on the system we're building. What we're doing is we're going to ensure that they have a grant of 50,000 naira over the course of the next 8 months. Over 1,000 small businesses across all states of the Federation will have access to 50,000 naira grant. Then we've now separately put in place a 125 billion naira facility, which is a low interest rate facility running on a repayment of about 36 months, about 4 years, where our small businesses will be able to, on a low interest rate, access fund, the needed resources they require right now to stop job losses and to expand their existing operations. How this is going to work is that we're looking at over 100,000 micro and small enterprises across this country that will be able to benefit from that 125 billion naira low interest financing package that Mr. President has urgently put in place to address their immediate needs. Now, I want to emphasize that what Mr. President has laid out for Nigerians in a very communicative and interactive way has been that this is an immediate package. This is not the medium-term to long-term solution. He's simply meeting Nigerians where they are right now, which is hurting from current economic conditions in the country. And so when we talk about the MSME capitalization efforts, when we talk about the CNG rollout, when we talk about what we're doing in terms of the mass review of the national minimum wage.
Well, sadly, we're running out of time, but let's quickly talk about one sector with a huge potential for government to implement these palliatives, and that's agriculture. What are the strategies in place to boost this sector?
As Mr. President announced to Nigerians, he has directed the immediate release of 200,000 metric tons of grains from our strategic grain reserves for onward distribution to our states and our local markets nationwide. We need to do everything in the power of the federal government, Mr. President, at the forefront of this, driving this with urgency to ensure that we crash the price of food in the country. That is a major step in that direction. But recognizing that releasing grains from the strategic grain reserves on its own would be insufficient, the President wisely said, look, we also need to ensure that while we're supplying the markets for the benefit of the end users, for the Nigerian customers, we also need to take care of the producers. So he has also directed that 225,000 metric tons of worth of fertilizers, seedlings, and other agricultural supplements are provided to our farms across our nation so that they can bolster production to not only replace the grains that have been mobilized out of the strategic grain reserves to refill the reserves, but also to ensure that we up the level of production across the country for onward mobilization to our farms and our markets nationwide. To our markets nationwide. Now, the president has also said, I need to make this point because many of our people may not have heard this before. The president has said, within the ambit of that that infrastructure support fund for states, which I mentioned earlier in the program, as part of the subsidy savings, as Mr. President has been able to compartmentalize the various components of the savings, it's strategically being directed at the reconstruction and new construction of local roads. These are roads under the ownership of the local governments. Many Nigerians don't know that as of now, of all the roads nationwide in this country, Nigeria has 200,000 kilometers of road nationwide. All roads in the country, 200,000 kilometers. Today in the country, we have 16,000 kilometers, 16,000 kilometers that belongs to the federal government, meaning Federal Ministry of Works only controls 16,000 kilometers of road in the country. Now, the other 16,000 kilometers, sorry, I said 16,000 kilometers. What I meant was 35,000 kilometers of federal road. Then the other 35,000 kilometers of road in the country, it belongs to the state governments. That combined, federal and state, is 70,000 kilometers out of 200,000. The remaining 130,000 kilometers of road in the country, out of 200,000, belong to our local governments. Our local governments that are not funded, they're not well provided for by the state governments, unfortunately. That's something that I believe Mr. President is working assiduously toward addressing. But the local governments control these roads, 130,000 out of 200,000 in the country. So what Mr. President has said is, look, this infrastructure support for states facility that I put on ground, the states have to ensure that we devote that resource to our local roads, because those roads are the ones that really pinch the feet of our people on the ground across the states. And we want to prioritize those local roads that link farms to markets, that link industries to ports. This is the strategic vision of Mr. President, and it's important for everybody to understand how this works. So on the one hand, we are empowering our farmers. On the other hand, we are crashing the price of food by distributing to our markets nationwide. But the third and most important leg is that Mr. President is focused on developing the connective tissue, which is the local government-owned roads that link our farms to our markets, so that we don't have half of our production spoiled on bad roads because they can't get to the market in time.
This conversation will definitely continue some other time. I mean, we still have a lot to talk about. But I must thank you so much, Special Advisor to President on Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngelale. Tonight, we focused on Pres.Tinubu's interventionist measures and implementation plans. Thank you so much for finding time to join us at the program. Thank you very much.
Good to be with you.
And thank you very much for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But the conversation continues from here. Get in touch with us on Twitter at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Goodbye.
Following is a paid presentation by ShopX TV.
Do you spend the night trying to get comfortable? Your knees rub both